Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the Mediator with me, your host, Brian West. Today's guest, we have Mark Kholos, and he is going to talk about his ministry and what he is doing with the Jewish faith and Christian faith, and he's going to tell us a little bit about himself. How you doing, Mark?
I am doing well. Shalom. Shalom, everyone.
Shalom, shalom.
If you're not familiar with that, shalom means hello, goodbye, or peace.
Yes. Now, tell us a little bit about your ministry and why you think it's important now for this time period that we're in.
Well, I'll preface it by saying I was born and raised in Jewish in Pittsburgh, and I grew up in the Squirrel Hill section of the city, which still has a very, very strong Jewish population. In fact, I went to Hebrew school there for 6 years, less than about a mile from the very synagogue where the mass shooting occurred 2 years ago that many of your listeners and viewers may have heard about.
Yeah.
And it's very sad when that happened. And I, at Hebrew school, at the time when I was attending Hebrew school, I learned to speak, read, and write Hebrew, and much of that time was spent in preparation for my bar mitzvah, which is the official ceremony of a Jewish male's entrance into manhood at the age of 13.
Yes.
So a few years after that, I graduated with a journalism degree from Duquesne University.
Okay.
And yes, there I was, a nice Jewish boy going to a Catholic university. And so after moving to, after I graduated, I moved to Warren, Ohio, and did the most Jewish thing I felt I could have possibly done when I accepted the King of the Jews, Jesus Christ, into my life in 1979. Now, by the early 1990s, I really felt God speaking to me and telling me about the Jewish roots of my Christian faith, and that I need to share that with others. So in 1995, me and my wife Cheryl founded our ministry, which is Shofar Shalom Ministries.
Mm-hmm.
And our ministry is more important now than ever before, especially, I believe, with a new generation who may not understand the connection between Christianity and Judaism. And an understanding of our Jewish roots can really develop a greater appreciation of the Jewish faith and culture.
Yeah, I see that quite a bit when it comes to not only just the younger generation, but there's actually some older people who engage in religion, but they fail to not only read, but they don't know their it's almost like having teaching a class, and the class shows up every day, but they never take the time to read the textbook. Emphasize on that a little bit, because when you're talking about importance of not only Jews and Christians, not only understanding the biblical text, but the Torah or any other text that comes along with their faith. Tell us why it's important that people read these texts.
Yes, interesting to me, one of the greatest ironies of history is that after the resurrection of Christ, the people who were not Jewish were actually wondering if they had to be Jewish to follow Jesus.
Yeah.
I thought, interesting. So today, with the exception of Jewish people who believe Jesus is the Messiah, like me, Jewish people in general do not recognize Jesus as their Messiah. They do not recognize him as God incarnate. He might be a great rabbi or maybe like a noble revolutionary, but certainly not the Redeemer. So the Jewish people, for the most part, believe that the Messiah will not be a miracle worker and certainly not die and rise from the dead. It's believed that the Messiah, that they believe will be an extraordinary, gifted human being who will lead Israel and the nations back to God. So, and back to your question, because so much physical and spiritual violence has been done to Jews in the name of Jesus, especially during the Crusades, many Jews just aren't comfortable. They're not comfortable with discussing Jesus, and therefore treat him almost as a non-person.
Yes.
Jews over the centuries have endured so much persecution. I would like to point out here that it was not the Romans who sent Christ to the cross. It was not the Jews who sent Christ to the cross. It was the sins of the world that sent Christ to the cross.
Yes.
And understanding that makes all the difference in the world.
Great, great. Well, I'm going to take a quick break, and when I come back, Mark is going to go in depth a little bit more about this understanding and why it is important now more than ever for people to understand not only the faith of Christianity, but the faith of the Jewish people. We'll be right back. You're the Mediator with me, Brian West. I'll be right back.
Tune in and don't forget to subscribe to Method 8 Inc. YouTube channel. You can also watch free public entertainment. And don't forget to show some support by visiting www.method8inc.com by buying something, clicking something, watching something, or just reading something. You can also sponsor a program as well. That's www.method8inc.com. Buy stuff, watch stuff, or read stuff.
Welcome back. Welcome back. I am back with Mark Kholos, and he is talking about the Christian and Jewish faith. And what a great time to understand each faith and not only where Jesus Christ stood, but where people's perception comes a little bit. There's a lot of different angles when you view each faith, and there's a lot of confusion out there. So Mark is here to set the record straight, to not only educate us, but get us to understand how each form of thinking has created the moment in time that we continue to live in today, where there's persecution and where there's a lot of religions, and there's so many people who don't understand religion in general, and why some just choose not to engage in it. But Mark is educating us on not only the foundation of the culture that we live in today, but the facts, and not only just the facts, but the historical points that we may not understand about each faith that may get us to understand how to be peaceful and to be able to sit and have a conversation without engaging in any conflict. Now, Mark, like I said, I want to thank you once again for doing this interview. Now, the next question is, a lot of people only get one angle when referring to the Jewish faith. Give us a brief history lesson, as you did before, of the Christian and Jewish relationship, and tell us why it's important for the world to know this.
Yes, I'll bring that up to speed and kind of pick up from where we spoke before, Brian. And sadly, anti-Semitism continues to raise its ugly head in our world. There's been a rise of anti-Semitism throughout Europe. The most dangerous place to be a Jew in Europe happens to be in France, of all places. That's the nation of France actually has the third largest Jewish population on earth after Israel and the U.S. So attacks and threats against French Jews surged to past 75% in 2019. So in the U.S. in 2019, there were 2,107 documented anti-Semitic incidents,
yes,
which is a 12% increase from even the year before. Now, the murder, as we talked about, the murders of the worshipers at a Pittsburgh synagogue 2 years ago,
I remember that
I mentioned. Yes, and it kind of awakened Americans to the dangers of anti-Semitism, and many people actually have a worldview conspiracy theory in which Jews are both demeaned and perversely elevated to the point where it's assumed that they have more power than they do, and that is so false. So in much the same way, I'm reminded of the events of this past summer with George Floyd's death. It registered in the public consciousness the whole scope and brutality of the Pittsburgh attack, and seared anti-Semitism into the national conversation. So the similarities, as with George Floyd attack and the Pittsburgh attack, they highlighted a danger that was there among both the African-American population and the Jewish population. Two separate incidents, 2 years apart, brought it to the surface, and we just really work to keep an open dialogue when we're dealing with anti-Semitism. In my mind, anti-Semitism as well as racial hatred are matters of the heart.
Uh-huh.
And that's to me where the hatred must be eliminated.
And Mark, you talk about that now from an academic standpoint, and not only that, but from a person who may not get the idea of what the Jewish people represent, the Christian people represent, the whether it's the Muslim faith or any type of religion, Buddhism. Now, people fail. They always say that people who fail to understand certain things, they fail to understand why events are taking place. Now, what you're talking about, which is of historical value, now when we talk about this in a sense of people being persecuted, the world has an idea of a Jewish person. Now, explain what is wrong with that idea, especially when you talk about the conspiracies around the Palestinian and the Gaza border, and the reasons why they're fighting over that land, and the fact that some people even say, they have this floating around where they say, well, the Jews made the bombs and they taught some of these people how to use the bombs, and they're blowing themselves up. So you're touching on something that is very sensitive to some people who may just need to sit at the table and discuss this to understand why or what is actually going on, especially when you talk about the Jewish people who have often been forced to different lands and to different locations. But all, it seems to me, what they've always wanted is an academic and a peaceful resolution where people actually understood and actually talked. Is that correct?
Yes, there's a dialogue that needs to continue along those lines, because we have a lot of people, even biblically, we constantly hear, well, the Jews are God's chosen people. Well, yes, well, they're also imperfect people like all of us.
Yes.
who have made mistakes, and the country of Israel, yes, mistakes have been made. There's the government, and then there's the heart of the people. And just like in any democracy, which if I'm not mistaken, I believe Israel is still the only democracy in the Middle East.
Yes, yes.
And so you have that, and you have that freedom among the people to do things that a democracy grants us. So you have that, and also you have just a lot of people who are not sure. They don't understand how to comprehend that. That's why we need to have the dialogue
Diplomacy.
to continue. Yes.
Now, when we talk about this, Mark, it sounds like where our next topic is talking about leadership. Why is it important for a leader to understand religion in each aspect, especially in the United States?
Well, to me, it's so important in the sense that we have the freedom to worship. That is part of our country. That is part of our Constitution. We have that freedom to worship. And yes, there's been talk, we're a Judeo-Christian nation, and the roots come from that. But that period of time in our history was marked by things in our culture that a lot of people aren't really proud of today. They look at it from the lens of today, and they see things, the slavery that existed, the bad things that occurred, and I don't think a lot of that was right, but yet you have people who practiced that in those days when it seemed to be more acceptable, but yet it doesn't make it right. It still doesn't make it right. So I have a little bit of a difficulty when people try to examine things with the modern lens of our culture, and yet that weigh it based on that, and not see necessarily what was experienced by the people during those times.
Yes. You be sympathetic, just basically sympathetic toward empathy is what you're saying.
Yes,
towards a
yes.
person's. Yeah, that makes it. You're relating it to what we see now, where there's not a lot of understanding of slavery. And you see people saying things, but they don't take the time to do their research before they go saying things. Is that basically what you're trying to say?
Exactly. Yes.
Makes sense.
Yes.
Makes sense. Well, now the last question I want to ask you before we take the break is we're talking about this thing of understanding the faiths and understanding the leadership role. Do you think that there needs to be more of a presence of ideals to try to get, or education? Do you think there needs to be something that the education system, do you think they're failing at teaching not only just the cultural, how cultures emerge, but just the reason why? Because what I've learned, Mark, is that sometimes children, they don't understand certain things a lot, and you'll see this a lot in today's environment, where children may not understand religion, they may not understand Christ, but they may ask questions like about Christmas, about Kwanzaa, and they may say, "Well, I'm confused because if this person worship this and this person worship that." Do you think that there's something that needs to be done when it comes to educating people about a religion?
Oh, certainly. There needs to be that, because this is the younger generation, and they're in those formative years, and during those times, the hate that we see that falls on our culture. We see the seeds of that hate. Sometimes it's brought forth by the parents to children,
Makes
because
sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
yes, they were maybe also educated that way, wrongly so, and they're passing it on to their children. So it's so important to give children, especially when you have a situation with broken homes, and there may be a absence of a father figure in the home, or mother figure, or whatever, or some cases no parents at all involved. So
Yeah.
I think it's so important to educate the children on these issues, and allow them to ask the questions and respond appropriately.
Makes sense. We're going to take another break, and we'll be right back. We'll finish up with Mark, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about anti-Semitism and why people need to reconcile their differences, and why the world needs that so much now more than ever. Don't go anywhere. You're in the Mediator with me, Brian West. I'll be right back after this break.
Tune in and don't forget to subscribe to Method 8 Inc. YouTube channel. You can also watch free public entertainment. And don't forget to show some support by visiting www.method8inc.com by buying something, clicking something, watching something, or just reading something. You can also sponsor a program as well. That's www.method8inc.com. Buy stuff, watch stuff, or read stuff.
Welcome back here in the Mediator, me, Brian West. I am on the phone with Mark Kholos, and he is talking about not only his ministry, but about the Jewish faith and why it's important now more than ever for people to not only educate themselves on religion, but the Jewish faith, the Christian faith, and just be understanding of what is actually happening in this time period. We see things happen in the news and in the media where something might grab people's attention. We may see a terrorist attack, we may see something happening, but we fail to understand why these events are taking place. Well, Mark is giving us a little bit of knowledge on why certain things take place over time and how these events kind of grab our attention and may get us to wonder, why are they happening? Well, Mark, the question I have for you before we get to our final wrap up is, could you tell us why anti-Semitism needs to stop, and why it's important for people, and particular people of different faiths, to come together and reconcile their differences at times such as now, especially now that the world needs not only leadership but resources and other things as well for people of faith.
Certainly, Brian. I think now more than ever, we see so many incidents that have occurred, as I described the number in 2019, the amount of anti-Semitic incidents, well over 2,000 that was documented, and I don't know what the number is in 2020. So we're coming to the end of the year, and we'll be finding that out. So when we have these incidents of anti-Semitism, it just really makes it very difficult to get beyond that for a lot of people. They see it, they may say things like, "Oh, isn't that terrible? That's terrible." Well, it is terrible, and there are people who speak those things to their children, who speak those anti-Semitic statements, just ridiculing the Jewish population. And it's been going on, as I said, for centuries that we have that. And it's just unfortunate because they need to hear the truth.
Yes.
And they're not getting the truth. They're just getting one side of a story, or there are groups, neo-Nazis and skinheads and just white supremacy groups that have been that really have victimized the Jewish people, the African American population as well, and other groups, and they're just full of evil, and we have this in our culture, and that's just unfortunate. So that's why we just need to educate, as I mentioned earlier, educate our younger people on these issues, start them at an early age so that they will have an understanding of this and carry that on.
Now, it sounds like but what we're talking about has a lot to do with not only diplomacy but ambassadors from each faith. Do you think that the ambassadors are not doing their job, not going out and kind of telling people or getting them to understand, or not even just that, but the ministers, the people who are clergymen of the Christian faith, of the Jewish faith? Do you think that they are failing at, or do you think it's just the way that some things just happen over time?
Yeah, I know there's I'm going to say it hasn't happened overnight, but I really believe, Brian, in the last maybe a few years, there's been, even in our own community in the Mahoning Valley and Youngstown and Warren, there's been groups that have been reaching out into the community to help the relationship between the Jewish population and the Christians as well, to do things together. And there have been incidents, I know, when the shootings occurred in Pittsburgh 2 years ago. You had people coming to the synagogue to really worship with the Jewish people and mourn with them during this time.
Yes.
So you had that, and you have open dialogues different times of year when there's Passover on one of the highest holidays on the Jewish calendar. You have that, which is usually around the time of Easter, and even during the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and those days as well. So you have an attempt being made in the Jewish community by the rabbis in our area, I've seen, to reach out into the community, and I think that's a wonderful thing.
Well, what I did, I'll tell you what I did. Now, I was raised Baptist, and I was raised fundamentalist. Well, I went to fundamentalist church, and fundamentalist preaching can be very hardcore. But what I did was I took it amongst myself to actually read a Jewish book, and that's what I don't tell a lot of people. I try to practice peace. I've tried to practice it my entire life, even though I'm a veteran. But that's what I did when I anytime I see something go wrong, I always try to grab a book. When I was in the military and I saw terrorist attacks, I tried to educate myself on a little bit to see what was happening between the Islamic faith and what was happening. So now, would you recommend more people start reading and getting to understand why these events are taking place?
Oh, certainly, and that's important because a lot of people, especially with social media, they'll hear just hatred being spewed out there, and they won't research on their own. So you must really, as you did, Brian, and I commend you for that. You must make sure you take it upon yourself to seek the truth and find it on your own, and not listen to a lot of the evil that's spewed out there.
Yeah, I read the book and I learned a lot about the Jewish faith. The book was it was an older book. I sold it's sold online, but I did learn about the customs. I learned about the people. I read two of them. One was about the escape from when Nazi Germany was pretty much doing what they were. I read that and I can't remember what the title was, but it was basically talking about how the hardest part was hiding and trying to find a way to survive. And then the other book I read was about the fundamentals of the Jewish faith, and it talked about the customs of Christianity. So it really taught me about not only something that I may not have known growing up, but I took the time to do that, and I would recommend that. Well, when we come back, I'm going to wrap up with Mark. He's going to conclude with his final thoughts and a little bit more about what his mission with his ministry is in this new day and age, to not only be an ambassador, but somebody who speaks for the Christian and Jewish people to educate and how people can always be welcome to come and seek his understanding at his place of worship. So when I come back, we're going to conclude with Mark. You're the Mediator with me, Brian West. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back.
Tune in and don't forget to subscribe to Method 8 Inc. YouTube channel. You can also watch free public entertainment. And don't forget to show some support by visiting www.method8inc.com by buying something, clicking something, watching something, or just reading something. You can also sponsor a program as well. That's www.method8inc.com. Buy stuff, watch stuff, or read stuff.
Welcome back. Here in the Mediator, me, Brian West, and I am wrapping up. I'm on the phone with Mark Kholos, and he is giving us the spiel, the ideas, the education of not only the Jewish faith, but the Christian faith. We learned a lot in this segment. These segments are always designed to educate and inform people to not only go out and do their research, but take the time to understand different cultures and why certain people think the way they do. One thing we learn in each segment is that there may be something that we did not understand, but we can prevent from happening in the future and to make a better future. And at the end of the day, really what everybody wants is a shelter, a safe place to live, and to live peacefully amongst their fellow man. Now, we're living in a day and time where all this is being revealed to us. We have sources of information all over the place, and we have people to ask questions. So whenever you see something happening and you want to know why is this happening, you may if you fail to ask a question, you may fail the people behind you and the people who need answers. So Mark, now give us your final thoughts and goals in reference to your ministry and faith. Now, what would you like to see change and to stay the same in this new environment that we live in?
Well, over the years since we started our ministry, as I had mentioned, my wife and I have seen more of a welcoming by the churches of our ministry, and it used to be it was not easy to get into their church and speak about these things, what we call the Jewish roots of our Christian faith. It wasn't necessarily the reason that we couldn't get in there. It was because that they disliked us. It was just they were used to it. It was just something that it was almost foreign to them to have somebody come in and talk about it. So now we're seeing that occur. We do, for example, every year we do Christ and the Passover Seder, where we talk about the Jewish Passover, but we do it from a different perspective of a Jew who is a believer in Jesus, and that is the angle that we speak from. So we have been invited to speak at different churches for that purpose as well. And also talk about the other Jewish high holy holidays I mentioned earlier, like Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, which is Feast of Tabernacles. And by the way, these holidays are mentioned in the Bible.
Yes,
and
yes.
A lot of people are surprised sometimes when you tell them that. You can choose, we like to call them Bible holidays, not necessarily Jewish holidays, because they're there for all of us to observe if we wish to. Nothing bad is going to happen if you don't, but they're there. They're there for all of us if we choose to do that. And I am so pleased that over the years, God has used my wife and I to educate people about their Jewish roots.
Yeah.
And we've had the privilege of sharing our ministry with children. And to me, as I said, that's where it truly starts. We must educate the younger generation during their formative years so they can understand this.
Now, people. Before we conclude, I've always talked about this with other people of faith, and the reason why I was raised Christian, but I was spellbound by the fact that there was a forgiving God, and I think this will get people to understand. Just you as a person and the God that everybody's is worshiping, but some people they fail to understand those principles. Now, do the Jewish people worship a forgiving God?
They do. Interesting, because one of the things that keeps us really together of the Christian faith, the Jewish faith, we believe in one God.
Yes,
It's not
monotheism. Monotheism.
exactly monotheistic society. Yes. Now the Christian people have a belief in the Trinity, although the word Trinity is nowhere in the Bible.
Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So we have that understanding, whereas what separates us is the Jewish people who do not believe that Jesus Christ was God incarnate and the Son of God. So there's no belief in that. So given all that, there are similarities that we can embrace, that we can come together on, and still now the forgiveness that you had mentioned among the Jewish people, they just believe that they can go to the synagogue and worship and pray, and they will pray, and they will listen to the teachings of the rabbi, and they just believe that they are forgiven.
Mercy.
Right. There's a God of mercy out there who will forgive their sins.
Well, that's great. That's great. A lot of people don't know that, and I think that's why, and that's what makes these interviews so important. These listen and learn segments. Mark, you've done your deeds for the day. You've done your duty, and you've represented your faith very, very well today. You've educated the audience. I'm sure that people will have a little bit more compassion and understanding. It's hard to see the people who have passed on, and the people who just fail to educate people. I've always believed that, being I try to practice just being academic the best way I can. I try to understand things, and I too struggle. I struggle. Nobody is perfect, but that's the purpose of dialogue and talking and getting people to understand why certain people think a certain way, why certain people do things the way they do. And like I said, I want to thank Mark. Are there any final comments that you want to make before we end this interview, Mark?
No, just keep an open mind, everyone, and be willing to share that with others, and do your research, and I think you'll understand this in a better way.
Yes, and last thing I will always like to say is I lost. There was a guy, a friend of mine, and I like to call him a friend because he wanted to publish a book. He was very into politics, and he was a Jewish man, and he passed away. This is why I thought it would be important for me to actually talk to somebody who had a lot of understanding. But his sole purpose was he could not understand why his demons that he was battling with could not be like everybody else's, pretty much. And I hope you understand what I'm saying. He pretty much, he was battling with some things politically and the understanding of the system in itself. And I think a lot of people of many faiths battle with this, not only just Christians, but Muslims, not only just Jews, but people of many different faiths. They battle with these ideas where sometimes they may want to understand other things, and they may not understand why Christians think the way they think, or they may see people getting harmed and may not understand that. But that was the whole purpose of me conversating with you, and I thank you for mainly bringing some of those points to topic. The last thing I like to say before this interview is over is if people want to visit or find you or support your ministry or ask more questions, how can they get in contact with you, Mark?
Well, if you like, I will be glad to share my email address, and that is simply my full name, Mark, M-A-R-K. The last name is Kholos at yahoo.com. And you can also call at 330-853-0275.
Now, do you have a Facebook account or a Facebook page for your ministry or yourself?
No, I do not. So, but that's where my email is, and our ministry. And I have just started to do more things with our ministry, and that's waiting in the wings.
I can always say that where there's a book and where there's somebody to ask questions to, there will always be peace. And that's always been the purpose of my show, The Mediator. Well, Mark, I want to thank you once again. And if you have any questions, please get in contact with Mark. If there is a better time for peace and for people to work together, and not only that, but ask questions and try to live amongst each other. Now it would probably be the better time than anywhere. In 2020, we've seen a lot of dark times. A lot of people go on to the next life, questioning, trying to find answers, and we see this every day. And some of us really are just searching for a place, a reason, and something to understand why God is merciful. We may not understand God in general, so we may have questions about what God is. There's always people there who have testimonies, you have ministers, and you have people who not only believe, but they understand why things happen, and they explain them in the only way that they know how to, and that is with the spirit that they are given within themselves to try to attract and teach others. Well, I want to thank you so much for tuning in this week with The Mediator. With me, Brian West. Have a good week, everybody. Peace.
Have no fear, fellow citizens. The Mediator is